Hello, welcome to David's Rebel podcast. So, what we're going to do today is have you ever wondered what it's like to code using React.js, but you've been intimidated by the syntax and getting started in the development environment? Well, fret no longer. We now have an easy way to learn how to work with React. So what I'm going to talk about in today's episode is ES6 JavaScript and import export modules. It's the precursor to how React works, so you'll be able to take a look under the hood and see how React was written. And once you know that, then React will be a lot easier for you because I know a lot of people just jump in and they try to learn React straight away without first understanding what lies on the underlying technology behind React, which is ES6 module syntax. So it's the new way that people are developing applications is to use type module ES6 JavaScript. So without any further ado, I'm going to start the clock and then we're going to go into a quick tutorial on how to work with ES6 modules. So what I have on my screen, I'm going to show you, is I've got a data grid and it's showing too many records. There's like 100 records. So what I want to do is create paging, like 10 records a page. And then when you hit 2, you go to 20. You hit 3, you go to 30. So it jumped by 10. So that should be pretty straightforward. So, but we want to do that in the context of creating a control so that we can reuse the control in future applications that we write. And we can use our data grid. So we're not like, polluting our controls with a bunch of business logic. We're trying to keep the business logic outside of the control. And to do that, sometimes you have to implement something called a callback. So in JavaScript, a callback just means that you can pass a function into a function. So while you're in the function, you can call that function. And then when you script out the JavaScript, you can use enclosures, which is a kind of a type of the language that will allow you to implement a piece of functionality for that control outside of the control. So that keeps the control pure from polluting polluting it with business requirements so that it can be reused with other clients, other customers. Let's pretend that you just got a job and the boss sits you down. It's pretty typical that if you start at a company, you're going to be jumping into someone else's code and you're going to have to figure out how to work within someone else's spaghetti. And sometimes that's intimidating. And everybody likes to start a new project where they're completely in control of all the variables. They start from scratch, just like the tutorials you've already gone through, all the studying you've done to get the job. But in reality, you're probably going to be thrown into a project that already has code, and the company wants some feature or some future development into some code base. So in this example, I'm going to start the clock. You got 20 minutes. It'd be like a interview exam. So the job here is to implement the paging control using ES6 JavaScript type module code. I'm going to do a quick review as well on template literals because I think that's going to be informative for how we implement this and for how React actually works. So let me start the clock. We'll give ourselves 20 minutes and see if we can be successful in this. All right. So the first thing is I'll just give you a quick layout of the project. So I've got an index.html, and then at the end, you see that the script type here is module. That's important. So that is going to enable ES6 for us with this code base. So it works a little bit differently than JavaScript. Just bear that in mind. So there's some differences that we need to know about. Otherwise, you're just working with the normal DOM normal HTML. So here's our pager control. I kind of want it to look like this. So I might like wireframe mock it out just in normal JavaScript to just write out what I'm kind of looking for here. So I want numbers that represent the pages, and then you can click on each number. So each one of these will be a link. So I'm going to go to discover in the code where the data grid, here's a grid. So it's a class object where the data is passed into it so it can render a data grid. That's what you see on the screen. This is a callback. So as it does the rendering, it implements a function that can um, change the way that the grid displays information for a particular customer. And this is a bit confusing because within this callback, I call another callback to get out of this controller class that I've created so that in the main.js, you can actually implement the changes. But don't worry about that. That has nothing to do with what we're doing here. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is template literal. So backticks on the top left of your keyboard, you'll notice these things called backticks. So if I press one, it puts two in. So I'm going to create kind of like a template for the paging control first, just to give you an idea of how this works. So we want it to be something like this. So if I go ahead and bind this to the form, so if I go back on my index page, I call it pager. So if I go to the main.js, oops, the controller here, main, it's called pager. So I'm gonna get the DOM element for the pager and set value to the template. So this is a template literal. Why do we use these and not just normal JavaScript strings? So if I refresh the browser, I should, my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 should change to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if I refresh and I go actually bind one of the things at the bottom, we have it going to 5 now. So we're adding the so-called control to the DOM to the page, which is ultimately what we want. Now, in terms of structure, what if we want this to be a reusable component in ES6? What we want to do is we want to do this outside of this area and we want to create a control. So to do that, I've created a modules directory where I put all my controls. So let's say we want to create I also have a base control. So I like to inherit from a single class object in JavaScript. That way, if everything extends from that one class object, then I can implement the functionality for all of my controls simultaneously if I need that in the future. So this is something I kind of think about. So like if I take this element, you see that it extends base. And all you have to do to make a class extend from another class in JavaScript is write the word extends to the class and then call super first thing in the constructor. That's all you have to do. And then you automatically are implementing inheritance. Okay, so let's create pager class. So I'm going to create a new file and I'm just going to call it pager.jsx. I'm using this format just to let myself know that I'm mixing HTML elements with data binding JSON type format script. And then I'm just going to copy the beginning part of this and then create a class called pager. And then in the constructor, I'm not sure what we're going to need to pass in yet. So let's think, well, maybe like table name and then what page we're on. No, I'm not sure yet. Total records, I think. Table name and total records. Maybe I'll do it differently. I'm not sure. So let's just start this way. Table name and this the total records. Now I like to create a render class that will render a component. So in this render class, I'm going to use those backticks and create the template that we ultimately want to render. So this is how you would create a simple module class in JavaScript ES6. And then the trick is you write export default pager to export this component so that you have access to it from your HTML website or your JavaScript. So you have to remember to put this on the bottom, and this sort of publishes the code that you've written. So you can decide, it gives you flexibility. It allows you to change names, and it gives you flexibility for what you want to expose of this component and to make public as you use the component in your web page. All right, so let's go back to where we're using the component. And remember, we did table name and total records. Okay, so here, if we want to instantiate that, then at the top of my page, I have to let this module know the existence of my control. So I have to import it to be able to use it. So we just created pager, and I just will import it based on its location of where it is relative to where I am in the project. So I'm in the modules directory already, so I don't have to put the modules folder in because I'm already in the modules folder. So it's relative to where the file is. The other thing I want to note is I've got this import gen API from, you can also specify a URL. And if the vendor that's created the component that they're publishing has allowed for cross origin requests, then you can use their component. So here's one that allows me to convert JSON formatted data directly into a relational MySQL database without having to do anything. So all you have to do is include this URL and you get access to a free relational database. Okay, so we're 10 minutes into it. We got 10 minutes left. Let's continue. So I'm going to go into the controller after I render the data grid. I want to populate this. So I want to create an instance of my pager to render to the screen. So I'm going to say, let my pager equal new pager. Now, what do we say? Table name. So here's the table name, and then the uh, total records. So I can get my total records from, let's just see where I put them. So here's my total records. So if I go back here, total records. Cool. Okay, so that should do it. And then I'm going to pass total records in. So now I know how far to go. The other thing I want to do is define a page size. So I'm just going to hard code that for this particular example. And you could pass as many parameters as you want into your control, depending on what you want to do. It's your choice. So basically, I just want to loop through now and count by 10. So I'll just go for I equals, just do a regular loop, regular JavaScript. I less than this dot total records. I plus equals this dot page size. And then I just concatenate. Now here's the trick is with template literals, you can implement placeholders or embedded expressions. So if you use the $sign, curly brackets like this, within this syntax, it will resolve, like I could do 2 plus 2 and I would get 4. So it's going to evaluate this as common JavaScript. So in our case, I just want to put in I plus 1 actually, because people don't think of 0 page. They usually think of first page, I think. Or maybe not. I'm not sure. Actually, there could be a page 0. So let me leave that. But then I want to create an anchor link. So href equals, and now you can use single or double quotes. And then I'm going to put my anchor tag in. It's just the JavaScript link. Now I want to call a function, which will be to like jump the record set of the data set to that page number. So I just create a function called page size, and then I need to pass in variables. So I'm going to put in my page that I want to go to, and then I might need the table name because it has to know where to get the data from. Okay, so technically I only have in the application the result sets for 10 records. So there's 100 records total in the database. Then as we click on this link, we need to go to the database to get the next 10 records. So that's where that component that you saw comes in handy. So this Gen API import will allow me to grab my record set from the database. So what I want to do then is I instantiate my pager, and then rather than use this hard-coded 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're going to grab from my pager, we're just going to render the results back. And if you look at the pager class, we return this, and then you can also change the styles. I might have 2 spaces in between or 1, and then you can just kind of play with the template as you wish. Now, one thing that people sometimes do is because in one grid, you might want it displayed a certain way. You might want those carrots instead of numbers. So what some people do is they implement a callback. So if you put in callback, it can be any name you want. It doesn't have to be called callback, but this can represent a function if you pass a function into it. And the way this works is, so I could say, if callback exists, so if it's not null, then I could say ret plus equals callback, and here I could just pass in, I guess, the page that I'm on. You can pass in any data you want, and then I might do the table name as well. So those 2 things. Else, use the default template. So if you don't, the way this controls works is if you don't use the callback, it's going to choose for you the template. But if you do use the callback, then we have a chance to override the template and build our own. So this will give the developer that works with this component the flexibility to be able to modularize or customize the control to however they want. And this makes the control more resilient, more flexible, more useful, uh, and it helps you prevent you from hard coding business logic into the control itself and then making that control useless for any future use. So you maintain the reusability of the component by implementing a feature like this. So I do recommend doing something like that. So I'll go back here. Now, if you want to implement uh, that function, all we do is to go function, and it will be table name and index, and then we use these enclosure tags to implement it. So now whatever we return from this function uh, will get used in the control. So we have a chance to kind of hijack it and then return whatever we want. Uh, so I could just go like this, and this will be index now, and this will be table name because it's now using the variables that are inside here. So that kind of gives you an idea of how that can work. And then it'll bind it to the pager div of the control. And we should have a link to a function called page size, but we don't have page size implemented in our page yet. So let's run this and see if we can get at the bottom of the screen, if we can get uh, those 100 to show up. And we did. So those are the 100 links to the 100 pages. So then what we can do is if we click on it, we'll get an error. So if I click on one of them and then I look, the console, you'll see the error. Page size is not defined. So I want to teach you how to make a function exposed in a module script tag. So you have to let the world know that your function exists. One of the big things about ES6 module development in JavaScript is keeping things private and hiding them and deciding what you want to expose as a public interface for your component. So if we go into main.js, to do that, you just write window dot, and then you can name the function what you want. So we said window dot, um, so this is letting the outside, the old common JavaScript know about our, we're exposing the interface to common JS. So uh, the function that we called was page size equals, and then you just say page size. But we haven't created this function yet. So if we want to create it, then what I'll do is I'll make an asynchronous function called page size with table name, and then the page size, this will be the page index. So in this function, I would want to be able to try to implement showing the grid with a specific uh, page size associated to it. So let me just look at where I'm grabbing. Oh, here it is. Here's where I'm setting up the parameters to do the database call. So what I want to do is basically want to go like this. I want to copy this code. This will load data using my API with the table name, and then I set the page index to be the skip value. My take, I'm always going to take 10, and then my table name I have, and that's it. You can also implement a where clause if you have a filter, an order by if you're clicking on the top of a header on my data grid, and then you can sort in whichever order by direction you want. And then this will set the data to the controller, which then shows up on the screen. And then what we want to do is we want to show the grid. So this is asynchronous. So it's not going to happen until you're inside this block of code. So in here, we want to show the grid, and it will be our table name, and then whichever headers. I'll just put ID for now. And then it'll update the UI. So let's see if this works. So now we've implemented page size. I'm not sure if it'll work though, because we kind of did a lot of code there. Oh yeah, there's a problem with unexpected reserved word. That's my await. Didn't like. So let's try that differently. Is it page size? All right. So if I go to pets, and click on 10, they're all the same data, so it's hard to tell. But it looks like it's paging through now the results. See, if I do 0, I get 1 to 1. If I do 10, I get some new numbers. If I go back to 0, I get 1 to 1 again. So I think it's paging through the data as we had hoped that it would and updating each one. And then the only other thing I would need to do is on the initial load, instead of displaying 100, I want to display. Oh, I think I am only displaying 10. Let me refresh it. I think I'm displaying 100 the first time. And then I can get rid of that. And so, no, I have 10. That's right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, so there it is. The only other thing I might update then is I might, if the current page number, we should pass into our controls so that we can not make that a link because you're already on it, or at least not make it underline or something like that. So to update that, I will just grab the current page. So back here, this current page would be the skip. Oh, I see the skip. Here it is. So there's the skip. So we want to update the skip in our function. So when we click, we want the skip to equal page index. So when we instantiate the control here, we want current page to include this dot this, and then pass that in. Page. Back to my controller, say current page. Let's see, current page. Just want to return. One thing I find a lot easier about using this type of coding before I jump into React.js is that I have full control over my JavaScript. I haven't lost my ability to use jQuery. I can use normal JavaScript, so I don't have to like go up some learning curve and spend a lot of time figuring out how to do the same thing I already know how to do in JavaScript in a new language called React, which is somewhat arbitrary, like binding and click events and stuff. I don't think you can just do it like this in React. You have to do something kind of special to get that to work. So I don't have to like learn those quirks with the framework. And then I can also trust that this is going to be around a lot longer than probably React. Like Angular JS only lasted 11 years. And then I don't know how long React is going to be. I know it's the hottest thing ever right now, but it might not be here forever. It might be replaced by Dino or Node.js or something. I don't know. So, or those are work together actually, but it could get replaced by something else. So maybe people will switch over to Vue because it's a lot easier to use, or scrap it entirely for JSPs, go back to Java Enterprise Application or something. So this will work in any sort of technology implementation that you choose. So if you go with a Microsoft MVC implementation, or you go with a Node.js server implementation, or even if you go with a Python web application, this is using JavaScript entirely. So it's complete JavaScript empowerment, native to HTML, which is supported in every platform, every operating system. The database is handled by an API service, so you don't have to go hunting around for drivers. You don't have to install the database. You don't have to pay for data in the cloud with Azure, and then be careful how much data you're using because you're going to be just build more and more money for it. Uh, it's just free, and then you just use it, and everything is done in JavaScript, so it's like powerful that way. So let's look at. Um, I forgot what I was going to do now. Next. All right. So, oh yeah, I was going to do it on the outside, what we just did on the inside. All right. So here, I wanted to implement my current page. So current page, and I just wanted to say if index equals current page. We'll do something else. This, and you're completely, it's your choice uh, what you want to implement. So it's completely up to you. This is just one recommended approach. You can do it any which way you want. That's the nice thing about coding this way is we're not attached to any framework. We're just using JavaScript. So hopefully now you have a greater understanding of how to create a modular control, how to use it in a web page. And if you look at our index.html, you see it's very clean. All we've got is this little div tag as a placeholder for our control. And I just named it the same thing as my control, but you could have more than one on your page. Uh, you just have to instantiate a new control and then bind it to an ID that you have on your page. So you can have as many as you want this way. And then I know React makes it a little easier to do that part of it, but you can, of course, build out and develop that in your controller logic class. So that's why I call it an API controller, because it controls that data binding from the control to the HTML. So you could make that easier to do just by coding an interface for that sort of logic. So let me just rerun it and see if it's didn't break anything. We go back again to not the context, but pets, where I got 100 pets. Now we've got 0. No, I forgot to put the spaces in. And then if I hit 10, it lets me know I'm on page 10. It'll look better if and then you could change the font so it like calls it out. You do things like that. So you could update it. But that's basically it. So I was hoping to get for 20 minutes, but we went 30. That's okay. I did a little extra on the callback, which I had on my syllabus. So thanks for your attention. And I hope to see you in the next video where in the future we get into doing some React. And then I also want to show you a little bit about this JSON to SQL technology that we've developed that you can sign up for and use right away. And then you could potentially very quickly prototype an application like to a customer. So the idea is that just real quick, I'll show you this because it's kind of cool. The idea is that you just specify your JSON definition uh, here. So here's an appointment. So you just make up your tables just like this and set up the relationships. Here I have a contact ID and a pet ID. And then what happens theoretically is uh, then you can bind this data information to the uh, to your page and you can build out a whole pet application. So what we have here is I've got a bunch of pets. I've got an animal clinic, theoretically, and then you can track appointments for your pet. So there's my vet ID. Then you can do your contacts. You can put them in. I've got a drop down. So here's all my pets. This guy has a lot of dogs named Ginger, and that's basically it. And then you could, I haven't implemented this yet, but you could implement the form then that's associated with this data grid. That's about it. All right, thanks for your time, and I hope to see you in the next video uh, where we go after some vertical markets. We finish this pet application, and then we get into some React coding, which I know you're excited to get into because it's all the excitement right now. And then we'll look at how to more efficiently build a web application. All right, thanks for your attention.